Okay. So basically, all right. So basically today, we're going to be going over what we need to edit, like when it comes to the individual articles, like the template that we're going to be using for the individual articles, which WordPress is defining as post, and what we're going to be going over as far as the archives. So, like, what happens when we go to a specific category. So, if we take a look at the demo website right now, when I actually go to click on any one of these articles, it's going to go to a page, like, that should have what this particular article looks like. And we can go ahead and customize like what this page looks like, in addition to pretty much all these different pages. What this this template looks like. The other thing is, if we were to go to ideally, if we click on any one of these menu items here at the top, what it would actually go to is a category that would have a list of all of those articles. So if we go into the WordPress dashboard right now, under post, under categories, these are the categories that we have set. We have latest news, featured, events, and editorial. We made up this fake one before. But this also tells us how many articles we have under any one of those categories. If I go to view any one of these, if I need to edit it, I can click on edit, and I can actually change the name of that. But if I want to actually go to view all of the posts under that category, I can click on view from this categories list, and it's going to bring me to a page that has all of the posts under that category listed out like this. So obviously this isn't really an ideal, I mean, it's efficient, like it shows me basically the information, but if we want to customize this, then we have to run it through a specific template, which is often called the archive template. So we're going to talk about the archive template as well as the post template, and what's actually involved with editing both of those. I have a couple of links to the website that are actually ones that we have before, but in particularly we're going to be using some references like from both of these references off of the WordPress developer website. So just to kind of talk about the rest of the semester a little bit, first of all, this week on the 29th, there's going to be another guest speaker for the UX class, and that's going to be in the Terra boardroom, room 905, the ninth floor of the Terra building. It's optional. You don't necessarily have to come to it, but that is where I'm going to be, along with anyone else that would like to be there. So if you need some additional help with your website, as with any week, you can email me outside of that that window. But from 6 to 7 this particular week, I'm going to be there with the as far as the guest speaker, along with anybody else from our class that would like to be there. But like I said, it's optional if you can't make it into the city or for whatever reason.
What the topic is?
So he's going to be talking about lean UX. So it's a particular movement, kind of. The impression I get that it's like a specific kind of UX design, one that's relatively popular at this point. Again, I don't know too much about it, but he'll kind of define it in this case. So that's this Thursday. Next Tuesday, which is the 4th, we're going to have just an entirely work-in-class session. So we'll just split the time with whoever's here. If you guys need any technical help during that session. And then Thursday the 6th is when you guys are going to actually present to each other. And Jessica, like I said, will we'll figure something out as far as when to do that. But yeah. But yeah. Any questions as far as this week or rest of the semester? Alright. So before we get into the post in the archive, Andrew was asking about ordering the posts. So if we wanted to put these posts in a specific order, what are the ways that we do that? So there's a couple of different methods that we can use. First, the default ordering is going to be based off of the post date. So the absolute easiest way of doing this is if we're actually editing. Oh, whoops! Sorry. If we're actually editing the posts themselves, if we go into the published on, as far as this date is going to determine as far as what order they're going to be. And generally, WordPress, again, by default, it's going to be by date, and by default, it's going to be in reverse order. So it's going to show the most recent ones first. So, like I have like editorial 1, 3, and 4 here. If we take a look at just the editorial post, 1 is published on 11/13, 3 is published on 11/20, and 4 is also published on 11/20. But I bet even the times of these are slightly off. So 3 is published at 17:52, and this one's at also 17:52. So
I kind of go and change the times.
So I guess if we wanted to, so if we ordered this as far as like the 19th, I'm sorry, this is 4. If I change the what I have for editorial 4 to the 19th, then it will reverse the order here. It should do that based on time as well. You said that it wasn't working for you?
No, that didn't work for me.
So if this one, instead of the, if they're both the 20th, so if they're both the exact same time, I believe that it will default to the title.
Okay. That's another thing, though. I didn't want the titles the way it displays the titles, so I left the titles blank when I was going to.
The titles here?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can take a look at that. But the so yeah, like I said, the easiest way of doing this is to just simply edit the dates so that the dates are in order that you actually want them today. However, if you want to keep the dates as they are, maybe you want to display those dates, but for some reason you want to put them in a different order than what they have as far as those dates. If you go into the link for the WP query, this, like I said, will kind of talk you through the WordPress loop and kind of the different options that you would go through as far as like how to specify the arguments that you want for the WordPress loop. So where we have used this before, we've used this to say, like, well, we want the specific category, we want a certain number of posts that it's going to display, and in the case of events, like we said, that we only want to see future events. With the other ones, we basically just set up the category name, and as far as like how many we want to see for the featured, editorial, and the latest news. So what we've done so far with the WordPress loop is just simply set up these arguments to see like the category and the number that we want to say. However, also in this WordPress loop, it has a way of setting up. If you scroll down, I'm not sure exactly where it is. Yeah. So somewhere down here, it has these order and order by parameters. So in addition to the same way that we would set up as far as category name or post per page, we would use the terms order and order by to determine what order we want them to be in as far as ascending or descending, and order by as far as like how we actually want to order them in that way. So by default, the order is going to be descending, and by default, the order by is going to be based off of the post date. So what that actual post date is. So you also have the option of ordering it by and the ID, the author name, the title, like the type, different things like that. You can even actually use rand to put it in a random order. If you don't specifically want to order it by any of those, let's see if this is in here. Yeah. So there is a way to set it up so that you can have custom values within this. So under screen, if you're editing a post, under screen options, which is a tab in the top right, there's going to be a checkbox for various things that you could possibly edit as far as this post. Anything about discussion or comments really has to do with whether or not your website has comments enabled on it. Again, highly recommend that you don't. But if you don't actually care about those things, you can kind of keep those unchecked so that you're not actually worrying about that here. Just 1 second. So you also have this thing for custom fields. And with custom fields, you can set it up so that you have a specific custom field. Like, for example, I could say post order. And for all of my posts, I could set up a custom field with this exact name, post order, and I can use a different value as far as like post order 1, post order 2, post order 3, so I can put them in that specific custom post order. Then, basically, with the order by parameter here, I could set it up so that it's based off of where it says meta value, and then I could use that meta value as far as the post order, so that it's based off of that instead of one of the other parameters. Like I said, it's definitely easiest to set it, just simply set it up by the date, or to actually, if you want it specifically by the actual title, or like, you know, I don't know, like a random order, or like even the ID, you can kind of use one of those. If you really, really want an absolute custom order that's not based off of any of those things, then the best way to do it is through the custom fields. You would create your own name that you would use throughout all of the different posts, and then you can kind of set the meta value for that to like that specific name. So that's one way of doing it. That's 5 different ways of doing it. If you need to. So it's one of those things where the more custom you need to do it, the more complicated it is. But you can see how it is. Did you have another question?
Sort of. What I noticed, I didn't know about that screen up in the.
Oh yeah. So this is when you're actually
screen options there.
yeah, when you're actually editing one of the posts, or if you're editing one of the pages, you're going to get this this tab, which is in the top right, that has the screen options. So again, when you're actually on the edit page or you're on the edit posts, you have this tab, which is giving you different options here. So these checkboxes basically give you other things you could possibly edit about the page, or other things you could possibly edit about the post. So
And that's the way it's going to show when someone is looking at your page, or just.
well, so for example, again, like with the posts, I have the option of checking the comments and the discussions. Now, these things really only matter, as far as the comments and the discussions, these things only matter if I have comments enabled on my website. I don't. So, because I don't have comments enabled on my website, I might as well leave these unchecked, because I never have to actually edit anything about this.
I was interested in the comments.
For the columns?
I see one or two comments.
Oh, okay, sorry. So this, oh yeah, this, sorry, has nothing to do with how it's actually going to display on your website.
Okay.
If I go to one column, then
I see.
all of these different fields are in one column. Whereas if I go to two columns, then I have this side column here where it has several different things that I, as far as editing this.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
No,
hear
that's.
that. But yeah, that's what the layout columns here. So that. But yeah. If you actually need to make columns within your website, what I recommend is just simply, if you edit the text here, you can go ahead and set it up like your text. You can set up HTML for that particular page any way that you want to. So, for example, if you want to do two different divs which are floating next to each other, or if you want to do a table, which would have different columns and like different rows, things like that.
Well, I noticed in one of the videos you talked about. I'm sorry. Things keep flying in and out of my head. I lost it.
It's okay. So yeah, if you want to make columns on a specific page, like just one page in particular, again, if you go to text, this will enable you to do HTML, which again, which it will enable you to, like, if you want to, because you already know like how to like set up like floats and things like that, you could set up like a couple of divs, give them IDs, and set something up that way.
I guess I did have a question about, so with the CSS, so you did one example where you did the style right in the HTML page. Do you recommend not doing that and keeping it all in your style sheet, or? Well,
it's up to you. It's up to the designer, like how they want to kind of keep things organized. As a general rule, when it comes to your CSS, your actual style sheet, like the one that I have here, which I'm calling custom.css, I mostly want to keep things in here which are going to be mostly universal. Like, so the things that are going to like go from every single page, I would put in custom CSS.
Okay.
Now, if I set up a div that only exists on one page or one post, you know, could I put that in my custom CSS? Sure. I mean, it doesn't, you know, really, it doesn't hurt anything to do it that way. But if I know that it's only going to exist here, then yeah, I could also do the inline style on this particular page if it's only going to exist on this one page. But yeah. Now, like I said, you could do HTML if you want to set up a specific columns for this. There are also plugins that will help you to do columns a little bit simpler. I don't want to recommend any offhand just because I think like almost every month like there's a different value. Well, there's just there's lots of different plugins out there, and rather than like try to review a bunch of different ones, if you if you go under plugins and if you go to add new, if you put in as far as the keyword, as far as columns, you'll get a bunch of different options. I would recommend just like looking through these different options to see like what makes sense to you. So like if you click on any of the titles, you'll get like a description of this particular one. Ideally, the better plugins will also have screenshots, which will give you screenshots of what it'll look like on the front end as well as what it looks like on the back end. So again, I would just recommend looking at some of these different options to see what actually makes. Oh, by the way, admin columns is something completely different. I don't use that one, but use different keywords. Like look up like as far as the plugins and find one that kind of makes the most sense to you.
I know that writing the CSS for that was so tricky just on the static HTML.
Yeah, so the thing is, again, like if you want, and this is actually even more, if you as the HTML like developer here, like you just want to on a specific page create a couple of columns, then I would recommend just going into text view and just making those columns like yourself, the way that you kind of already know how to do it with code.
Okay.
The advantage with the plugins is if you know for a fact that the client might want to kind of create plugins themselves in an easy way. So plugins will definitely be more useful for that if the client needs that option.
Okay.
Or if you just want a slightly simpler option than always making tables or making divs that float and things like that.
Thank you.
But yeah. So when it comes to the ordering with what we've done so far, again, like we have those different options when it comes to that ordering there.
I have a quick question about editing stuff in the HTML. In my experience, like sometimes I'll like edit stuff in that HTML text pane, and I'll save it, and it'll like rewrite some of the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, so the thing is, like, sometimes, particularly with paragraphs, it will sometimes, like, kind of rewrite things. Like, if you have, like, for example, like a couple of line breaks, it might kind of change that into, like, one paragraph rather than a couple of line breaks. There is...
Yeah, usually it doesn't really matter that much, but like sometimes it's like
sometimes it's really annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like stubborn.
And by the way, just as a warning, there's this thing called Gutenberg that you might have heard about if you keep up. So this is something that's going to be coming with a WordPress update pretty soon. Where basically this Gutenberg thing will be the default editor for posted pages. Now, there's a lot of controversy about this Gutenberg thing because basically it's easier for non-coders, but it's frustrating for coders, basically. So the thing is, it makes certain things when you're a non-coder and you just like to work with basically what's a WYSIWYG, like as far as actually coding, then a lot of people find that this kind of thing a lot easier, which is why WordPress is trying to push it to kind of make things more accessible for non-coders. But a lot of developers who do know coding find it very frustrating because it's much tougher to do this sort of customization with the HTML. I want to say there might also be plugins that kind of make sure that the editor does not change your code, but there's also ways of doing it. There's a file called functions.php, and you'll find that when you go to look up certain things in WordPress, like how do I do this, or how do I make this kind of change in my theme. You'll find that there are certain forums out there that will suggest making edits to this functions.php. This functions.php is basically code which is almost like the header. Basically, it's code that will go throughout the entire website, and it's... how to describe it? it can kind of help with certain controlling different aspects of the dashboard as well as different aspects of the front end. You want to kind of be careful with it because if there's any errors in it, it can kind of shut the entire site down. But like I said, it can be useful for making certain edits that you don't want to necessarily make plugins for. There's pretty much a plugin for just about everything. But there's sometimes when you don't want to have to worry about a plugin if you think that something might be small. And again, like I said, as you're Googling like certain issues, a lot of times I come across forums that will suggest making some slight code edits to that functions PHP. So I know for a fact that in my experience, like when it comes to making sure that the editor does not rewrite your code very much, I know that there's code that I've changed in the functions PHP. I don't remember it offhand, but it's something I can definitely look up if anyone's interested in that. At some point.
Yeah, because when I searched around for ways to get around that issue, people suggested some plugins, and they didn't really, like, I think the plugins did stop it from writing certain things, but there were like some things that was still rewriting even after downloading the plugins. So.
Yeah, the paragraph thing is the most annoying. It's most prevalent. And you know what? Again, like once it's Gutenberg. Oh yeah. So the other thing about Gutenberg, by the way, just really quick. So there's going to be a WordPress update, a major WordPress update that's going to make this by default. But there will be an option of using what they call the classic editor, but it's basically a plugin. So if you want to use the classic editor, you have to use a plugin to make sure that it's going to work the same way that you always want it to be. My suggestion: try out Gutenberg, see if you like it. But there is the option of doing the classic editor if you don't like it.
Do you know if you install the classic editor that will replace Gutenberg with the classic editor, or that you'll still have like both side by side?
So it's my understanding, based off of this, that you can install the classic editor now, and it will be the default when the new update comes in. But it's not that. It shouldn't be that big a deal as far as installing it later, like installing the classic editor later. But it's up to you. Like I said, try out Gutenberg. See if there's a lot of controversy based on it. And WordPress, the engineers behind WordPress are always going to try to satisfy both people as far as developers as well as the admins. So it's not that they're purposely trying to frustrate anybody. So it'll get better. We'll work out whatever bugs that people have issues with.
Definitely gotten complaints from people about WordPress not getting rid of user friendly, so I guess it makes sense that they would add something in there like just built in.
Here's the thing. I mean, there are websites like Squarespace and Wix that is completely like, you know, the what's called like a WYSIWYG. It's what you see is what you get. Like basically, you're editing it the same way that you would edit like Microsoft Word, and you would create websites that way. And the thing is, there's space on the internet for everybody, you know. So the thing is, there's definitely, you know, people that want to use that kind of thing. I like WordPress because you're not forced to use a specific template. You could potentially build out any kind of design that you want, which is like what we've been doing this semester. It's like we've been starting with a completely fresh, unique design and building it out like from there. With Squarespace and Wix, like, well, they might have some flexible templates, but it's still a template, and you have to kind of work within the limitations and parameters of that. But the caveat of that is that, yeah, some people find it easier to actually make edits to it. But yeah. Basically, which, I mean, it's ridiculous because they're not. It's not the same kind of thing. Like it's not. It's like apples trying to taste more like oranges. Like just be apples.
But I think it's fine as long as like you know you still have the option to use the classic editor.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't infringe on that.
Like I said, I have faith that the people behind WordPress are gonna try to make it better. Right now, I'm not a huge fan, but I have hope that it's going to get better. So yeah. So again, if you want to, as far as doing the ordering, there's a few different options with that. Let's take a look at the single articles. So, like I said, right now in WordPress, we have two different kinds of post types, basically. We have what are called pages, and we have what are called posts. In this particular website, and it's up to the WordPress developer how they want to define what a page is and what a post is. But in this particular kind of website, what I recommend is your pages being things that are pretty static, like, about page, contact page, and of course the home page. So these are things that are not going to change very much. These are things which are pretty much going to be standards on the website. I mean, in reality, I don't actually have this present, but in reality, I would actually have about and contact somewhere within my menu here. And again, those are pages that would be pretty much a tentpoles as far as the website. For this particular website, what I'm defining as posts are the actual articles themselves. So, there's 5 different articles which are on the home page. There's 3 different articles in the features and editorial and events. And every single time you come to my home page, you would see different articles. I should say, every couple of days when you visit the home page, you're going to see something different. Similar to any other kind of news website like CNN or whatever. So articles are these individual pages that are talking about that specific topic. Now, what we've done so far when it comes to the home page, or if we did want to have an about page, I'm going to view this. When it comes to the home page or the about page, both of these kinds of pages are running through this page.php. And we know this because if we take a look at this page.php, there's a lot of complicated code in here, but somewhere along the line, we have this if statement. And this if statement is checking to see if we are on the front page or the home page. If we are on the front page, it's going to be doing a bunch of different stuff, but at the very top, it's going to have in bold, this is the front page. If we follow this if down until we get into an else, so we have if, we have else, and the else is basically saying if it's not a front page, then at the very top it's going to have an italics, this is not a front page. If we take a look at the actual website, on the home page we have in bold, this is a front page, and on the about page we have this is not the front page. What this is proving to us, obviously we would take this text out once we've tested it, but what this is proving to us is that both kinds of pages are both running through this same exact template file. We have this if-else statement, which is kind of creating a fork in the road. One which is for all front pages, which there's only one, but one is for all non-front pages, which is anything else. Anything else that is in this list of pages is not a front page. So, pages run through page.php. What we are defining as posts is going to run through single.php. I don't know why they don't call it posts. I didn't make WordPress. But there is a file called single.php that came with our underscores theme. If we go to edit that, this is the file that everything that is defined as a post, every single one of these, no matter what category it's under, everything that's defined as a post goes through this template PHP file. So just to prove that to ourselves, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an h1 tag in this file. I'm going to say this is single.php. And I'm going to go ahead and save that and make sure it's uploaded on the website. And if I go to actually visit any one of these posts, whether it's the featured 5 title or the editorial 4 title or the latest 5 title, we have this is single.php in an H1 that's at the very top of this page. So I know that all of these posts are going through this one file. This might seem a little silly, but it's I still actually do this every once in a while just to kind of debug issues. If I'm looking at certain code and it's not changing on my website, I'll put in something like this that should affect it no matter what, so I can make sure that I'm actually editing the right file. So I know that I'm editing the right file here. Now, this will kind of look very, very similar to what we originally had for page.php. We've made a lot of changes to page.php, but if you at least kind of remember what it used to look like, it was very similar to what we have for single.php. We still have, just like page.php, let's actually put these side by side just to kind of compare a little bit. Here on the left-hand side, I have the page.php. Here on the right-hand side, I have the single.php. So just like with page.php, I have this get header. Get header means that it is getting the header PHP file that we have in our theme. Scroll. Just like with the page.php, we start off with these 2 containers. One is called div with the ID primary, and one is a main tag with the ID main. We could very easily get rid of these, but they're not actually hurting anything either. It's just basically the way that WordPress helps to kind of define some containers. If they're annoying to you, if you're not quite sure about them, just get rid of them. But like I said, they're not hurting anything either. We can work around them without it hurting anything. Now, with single.php, we're going to start to get into some PHP code. So, as always, wherever we see this angle bracket question mark in PHP, or we see this question mark and angle bracket here, we know that we're dealing with some PHP code. So here is regular mom and pop HTML. Here is where we get our kind of complicated PHP code. And this is starting right here, and we have a whole block of PHP code in this highlighted area here in single.php. Let's get back to that in a minute. Right after that, this is ending off main, and this is ending off the div with the ID primary. So once again, this is just a wrapper. These 2 containers, div with the ID primary and main with the ID main, are just wrappers for the rest of our content. We also have get sidebar, which I think we decided at some point we weren't going to need or use the sidebar. And get footer, which is basically, once again, getting the footer.php. So this single PHP is sandwiched between the bread of header.php and footer.php. Those 2 are the bread. This single.php is just the meat between these 2 pieces of bread. The same way with page.php. We have get header at the very top. Oh yes. Oh yeah, sorry. I'm looking at the screen up here. So okay. So the same way. Again, like we have header, we have scroll. We have footer. All of this, and we have like the primary and the main is just kind of sandwiched between.
Styling on the main and primary? The ID and the path?
So there is, when we use the underscores, we use the underscores, it came with style.css. Now, again, there's a couple of different ways of working with the style for the underscores. One is that you can edit this file, and you'll find there's a lot of things that are inside this file and somewhere in here it probably has something regarding the primary and as far as the main. And a lot of this is just I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of just trying to standardize like certain things, which are very common wants that a lot of programmers have. It's up to you if you want to keep it. But what I recommend, as far as working with this underscores.php, is that you create your own custom CSS, and that way you only have the CSS that you want to deal with inside this custom CSS. Now, if you decide to completely throw out the style.css, that's your prerogative. And if you're going to do that, then yeah, this primary and this main probably mean absolutely nothing when it comes to your WordPress website. So it's just a couple of containers. The style.css that comes with underscores, it does make certain responsive things a little bit easier. But yeah. It's up to you, again, like how you kind of want to work with the style. Some people like to work completely from scratch, and some people kind of like to work with a general foundation that the underscores provides. But yeah, so we're mostly going to be dealing with this single.php. And we have the header and footer, and we have the content in between. Okay, so let's take a look at this highlighted area. And first, let's simplify some of this so that we're not looking at a bunch of code that's going to confuse us. So first of all, as you can probably surmise from just trying to read some of this, this part here only has to do with comments. Again, as when you first open up WordPress right out of the box, WordPress assumes that you want to create a blog that includes comments. I, again, highly recommend your website does not use comments if you really don't need it to be. So let's go ahead and take this highlighted part out. This is pretty much everything between the post navigation and the end while. So this while loop, if you remember, is just going through a loop. And while this makes a lot of sense when we're pulling up a lot of different kinds of posts, in this particular case, it actually is only bringing up one thing. However, the way that WordPress works, it just does still make sense to use a loop in order to actually pull that information. But anyway, even though we have a loop here, it's actually just pulling in the information from one post, and this is if we want to have comments in that post. Again, let's take it out. Not that it's hurting anything, but we might as well take it out so that we simplify what we have here. Now, if I go ahead and refresh this, we're probably not going to see much of a difference here. I took out that this is the signal.php. Let's take a look at this code for a minute. And we're taking a look at what it ends up with. So here we have the primary, and here we have the main. Those containers. Inside of this, right after main, we have a tag which is called article. We have a tag which is called nav, and then we're closing off the main and closing off the primary. So we have this tag that's called article. As I have this hovered over, this is all the main content of my post. If I drill down on this, we have a tag which is called header. Inside of header, we have an H1 which has the title. We have a div called entry meta, which has my date and has the author in there. So the author is basically just the username. The date is the date of the post. So we have the title, the date, and the author all within this header inside the article. We have the post thumbnail inside of its own div. We have this div that's called entry content. And entry content basically has all of the content. If I were to go to edit this actual post, it has all the content which is actually inside of this box here. And that's entry content. And then we have this thing called the footer, footer tag. Now this isn't the footer which is at the bottom of all of my pages. This is a footer tag very specific to this article. And in that footer, we have where it says posted in featured. Basically, it's saying posted in this particular category. We also have an edit link, and this is only for admins. Only admins who actually see this, which would be a direct link to actually edit this post. And then it ends off the article. So after the article, we have this nav, and this nav tag has basically navigation to other articles in my website. So if I click on this, I'm going to go to featured 4 title. And if I click on this, it's going to go to event 6 title. So right now I'm on featured 5 title. Again, if I click on the one that's to the left, I go to featured 4 title. If I click on this one, I go to event 6 title. Basically what this is, that's inside this nav tag, is navigation for the post. So if I just simply want to go from post to post to post to post, I can basically click a previous button or a next button, and it's going to go through all the different posts of the website, regardless of category. So this code right here, which is bringing up this nav, so this nav tag here, which has this post navigation, this is only if you want to give users the ability to go from post to post from this particular post page. This is controlled by this one line here where it says the post navigation. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of ways to edit the actual HTML of this navigation here. We could edit the CSS for it by just highlighting anything about this navigation. Like for example, we could say nav dot navigation post navigation, just like it has here. And in our CSS, we could make certain adjustments, like we could say that we want the color to be different or the size to be different. Maybe we want to add or remove some margins, maybe add like a border or something like that. So we can add different style to this navigation if we really want to. But when it comes to actually editing the HTML for this, it could be a little bit harder. So for example, if we wanted to add in like arrows, or if we actually wanted to call this next post or previous post, then that would be a little bit harder. I'm not a huge fan of this post navigation, but it's completely up to you. If you want to have it, and you can kind of customize it in the CSS, like I said, the way that I would do it is just like I'm seeing here. In the inspect element, or when you go to view source, you can find out the tag names and the classes for this post navigation. Then you can reference that in your custom CSS to make certain changes to it. If you don't want to deal with it, then I would recommend just simply getting rid of this this one line, and what you'll see is that it gets rid of that post navigation. So underneath the article, underneath this tag for the article that has basically all the information for this post, it just simply ends the main and ends the primary. So right now we're just dealing with the post information. So we've simplified this just as much as we really need to. Again, the post navigation thing is completely optional to you, but we've simplified this single.php as much as we can so far. So where we have this while loop, again, we have the primary, we have the main, and we're ending off the primary and the div here. We have this while loop, which in practice is being replaced by this article HTML code. If we take a look at this one line here where it says get template part, We dealt with this a little bit in the page.php. We might have. Okay. Anyway, what this is basically saying is I want you to pull some HTML and some possibly PHP code from another file in the theme. Where is this file is telling us a little bit here. So it's saying template-parts/content. And if I go into my files for the theme, I have a folder called template-parts. Now, we have 4 different files in here, one for content, one for none, one for page, and one for search. I'm just going to tell you right off the bat that what we're looking for here is the first one that just simply says content. So the none, page, and search are used for different things, but this particular one that we're actually trying to, where it's actually getting the HTML and PHP code is coming from this file, content.php. So let's go ahead and open that up. Okay. So the very first thing inside of content.php is an article tag. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. So again, right inside of primary, the div with the ID primary, right inside the div with the ID main, the very first thing inside the single.php is an article. So again, just like we have with the sandwich of the header and the footer, we have this sandwich in here. It's replacing what we have for get template part with what we have in content.php. So it's basically taking all of this code and putting it right here in this where we have get template part. And again, we know this because it's starting with article tag and it's ending with that ending article tag. And if we take a look at this, there's a bunch of PHP code kind of intermixed with this. But if we just focus our eyes on the HTML that we kind of recognize, we have article, we have inside of that we have header. Next to the header we have something regarding the thumbnail, but then we have this div with the class entry content, and we have after that entry content thing we have a footer. If we take a look at this in the code inside of article, once again we have header, we have div post thumbnail, we have this div for the class entry content, and we have this footer. So these 4 elements, header, post thumbnail, entry content, and footer, are the exact same main HTML things we have here inside of article. We have header, we have something for the footer, or I'm sorry, something for the thumbnail, we have the content, and we have the footer. Does that make sense as far as like how this is matching up? Okay. So once again, so there's a couple of different ways to proceed at this point. We have single.php and we have content.php. Both of these files together, when they're kind of married together, holds what we have for the content for our post here. Now, at this point, you could decide to keep editing both of these files as you need to kind of set up what that content actually looks like. What I like to do a lot of times, and this is optional, it just kind of depends on what file you're actually editing. But what I like to do is I like to basically copy everything that I have inside of content.php and replace that with what I have here with the get template part. Now, before I do that, I need to pay for it. So this will enable us to only edit one file instead of editing 2 anytime we need to make some changes to this post post template. Now, before I do that, I want to pay very close attention to what I'm copying and where I'm pasting it. So what I'm copying, the very first bit of this is HTML code here. I know this because we have the angle bracket and it has article. and where it ends is HTML code as well. We have the ending article here. However, right here I'm inside of PHP code. So I couldn't just simply replace this in here because I'm still inside of a PHP container here. What I'm going to need to do is, after what I have as far as the post, I'm going to need to end this PHP container here. And you see my color coding is going off here because I need to start the PHP container here. So we have the while loop starting here, and we have the while loop ending here, and in between we can write normal HTML. So here's where I'm going to go ahead and copy everything that I have inside of content PHP, and I'm going to replace everything inside of the while loop. Where I did have that get template part thing, I'm now replacing it with everything that is inside this content PHP, except for, you know, I guess like the comments at the very end, but just like as far as from the article to the article. So now, inside of single.php, I have, as far as the get header, I have the two containers for the primary and the main. I have this beginning while loop here. Then I have this article HTML. There's a bunch of stuff in here, which we're going to get to in just a second. But that article ends right here. Then I'm ending the while loop. And then it ends the main, the primary, and the footer. Okay.
Once you get out, you want to contact
Exactly. I mean, there's no reason to delete it, but we can go ahead and close it because we don't actually need that anymore. Because we're now not referencing a reference file, we actually embedded it in here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and tab this over. Not because it needs it, but because I need to have it tabbed over so that it's clean and nice. Yes. So let's take a look a little bit further into this to see if maybe there's other places we can simplify. We can control this a little bit better. So if I take a look at this, obviously I at some point want to have the title in here. Maybe I want the date in here, maybe not. Maybe I want the author here, maybe not. All of that is controlled inside of this tag header here. So this header, which is inside of article, holds the title, holds the date, and holds the author in there. Then we have this thumbnail, we have the content, and we have this footer. In this footer, it says posted in whatever the category it is. It also has this edit link. Now, by the way, once again, only admins will see this edit link. So if you're just a normal visitor, you would only see posted in this category. So you can click on this edit link if you, as the admin, immediately want to find a way to edit this one page. You also, as an admin, will have this black bar at the top, which will have the edit post here. Basically what I'm saying is you really don't need this in here, because as an admin, you have the option of doing it up here. Whether or not you want this or not, as far as this posted in and the featured, all is determined inside this footer here. Now, I kind of want to simplify this. If you want that, as far as like, you know, this is particular in this category, then that's fine. You can keep that in there. But if you want to kind of keep this as clean as possible so that it only contains the information for the post itself, then you could potentially get rid of that. And then where this article ends is basically just the end of the content itself. So this div of the class entry content, for the most part, what it should be doing is it should just simply be pulling in the content for the article itself. technically, the only thing that we really need inside of this div is the following content. We really only need PHP, the content, just like that. If we only have this inside of edit content, this will still work. All of the rest of this stuff is mostly if you have like translators on your code, if you have like extra content, specifically the what is this for? The link pages. I don't remember what this is offhand. But for this entry content, if all this PHP code kind of confuses you, I would suggest simplifying this. So the only thing inside of entry content is just this one line where you have PHP, the underscore content, and then you're ending off the PHP there. Yeah, for the entry content. And let's double check. Yeah. So as I refresh it, again, I don't see any change here because it's just simply the content itself. So we'll get into the thumbnail in a minute, but let's also take a look at this header. This header also looks more complicated than it probably needs to be. If we take a look at the inspect element, when I take a look into this header, again we have, God bless you, we have three main things in here. We have the title itself inside of an H1 tag, and we have a div that has the class entry meta, but basically that div is split up into two different spans where it has like the date as well as the author. So I'm going to show you how to simplify this a little bit even further. Inside the header, the code for the title is just PHP, the underscore title. The code for the author, if you want to have the author in there, is the underscore author. Code for the date. Okay, so where I'm actually getting these, and let me just double check as far as what the date is. Back on the class website, under the loop, article. Other than as far as describing basically what the loop is all about, it also says, hey, what the loop can display. So as it's going through this while loop, it's saying like what the actual thing is that it's displaying. So this is, for example, it can display the category, it can display the author, it can display the content, the excerpt, ID, things like that. When it comes to the date, okay, yeah, and that's the time here. So as we discussed with the page.php, well, let me just pull it up as it is right now. So I'm going to do PHP, the time, just like that. Now, if you like the way this looks, then just keep it. Don't make my changes. But if you want to customize how this looks so that you have a bit more control over it, then these are the three main pieces of information that you actually need. The rest of this is just kind of customizing it in a slightly overcomplicated way, basically. So if we can go ahead and get rid of all this stuff that's inside a header. So that what we're left with in the header tag are these three pieces of information. So the title, well, yeah, the title we probably want in an H1 tag. Let's go ahead and put that in there. The author and the time, well, for right now, let's go ahead and just put them inside of separate divs. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh. Okay, so so we take a look at the inspect element. My code here is a lot simpler. We have the header tag, which includes the H1. It includes a div with the author in it. It includes a div with the time in it. Now it is bringing up literally the time that it was posted instead of just the date. Either last week or the week before, we talked about the fact that when it comes to PHP dates, when we talked about this with the events, when it comes with the PHP dates, we have to put it into this kind of format where we have, if we just simply put in the time, just like this, then it will kind of decide itself like how that format actually is. Actually, where it's really pulling that from, if you really want to know, if you go under settings and reading, no, writing, no, general. So this is where it's actually pulling that from as far as the general time format. So if we picked on one of these other ones, then it would find that as the general time format. However, if we want to customize it ourselves, what we did with the events in the page.php is inside those parentheses we put in quote, we put in an uppercase F, a space, and a J. Now what that means, if you Google PHP date, I should probably put this on the FAST website, but if you Google PHP date, the first result is going to give you what all those codes actually mean, as far as whether or not you're using a capital D or a lowercase d. It does make a big difference as far as like how you actually want to display the date. So if we want to do this basically kind of the same way that we did the events, where we had a uppercase F and a lowercase j. I don't remember exactly what that is, but we'll see in a minute. I believe it was the month spelled out, and then the day. Yeah. So we could easily do it that way. So, again, the way that the header tag looked before, we have a bunch of complicated PHP code in here, and it's kind of hard to figure out like what it is that we want to edit to get what we actually want. We simplified it into these three main components: the title, the author, and the time. And yeah, we have to kind of figure out like what the code would be for the time, but at this point we could put in whatever kind of HTML, whatever kind of extra text that we want. So we could say this article was posted on, and we could say the author for this article, or whatever it is that we actually want to say. So this is the PHP code. This is the actual replacement of pulling information from the database. Everything else that's around that PHP code is completely up to us. Whether or not we want to put them inside of divs, whether we want to put them inside of bold tags or italics tags, whether or not we want to have a div with the class, maybe article, date, and then customize that in our CSS, however we want it to be. This is the main code that we need as far as the replacement to get the time of this article. This is the main code that we need to get the author. This is the main code that we need to get the title. Everything else around this we can customize however we want. As far as, again, the containers, the classes, the IDs, whatever we want. But this is a kind of a much simplified way. You know, we don't really even need this header. But the thing is, like, we just need, as far as this PHP code here, that kind of pulls in that title, author, and time. Same thing with the content down here. Yeah, there's a lot of complicated PHP code in here, but the main thing we need here is just simply this line here, where we have PHP the content. So I'm going to get into the thumbnail, but any questions about this?
So if I formatted my content with like an image in the middle, all of that I would instead do when I was creating posts in WordPress?
Yes. So let me pull up my
But like the formatting of the post page, if say I have like a sidebar with trending articles, that would all go in the PHP file.
Yes. In fact, I mean, so I got rid of like the sidebar of this one. I mean, you could potentially utilize the sidebar that you have there, but there's also other ways you can kind of customize this one file to include that sidebar yourself. Let's take a look at, I don't want to make this about building out my particular design, but I just want to briefly take a look at, this is my article HTML. Very kind of simple. I actually have the image above the title and the author information, as well as the date. But if we take a look at the HTML here for my article .html, again, we're going to assume that all of this is somewhere within my header. But here, where I actually have the article tag, which you probably didn't call it an article tag, but here where I actually have the content for my article, I have the div with the background image of the featured image here. I have my title inside of an H1 tag. I didn't put any kind of special CSS in here, but I did have the author as well as the date inside of an H2 tag. I have a div with the class article text, which holds in all of the actual text for this particular article. So, using this kind of same format, I'm going to go ahead and put these side by side, so that here on the right hand side is my article.html. This is my static HTML, and here on the left hand side is my PHP, my single .php. So in my design, if I'm actually trying to build up my design, I actually have the thumbnail above what I'm calling the header. Now, I don't actually have a header in my code, but it's also not hurting anything. It doesn't really matter. So after the thumbnail, I have the title inside of an H1 tag. For my author and my date, I'm actually using an H2 tag. So I have an H2 tag where it says by something 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 somebody, and I have dash and an EM, which is the same thing as italics, that has the date in there. So I would take the code, the PHP code for the date, and I can replace that inside the EM. And I have the code for the author, and I can replace that where right next to by the author, I have a little hyphen in there as far as a normal text. And that would display pretty much like, what I have for my end result. Let's actually, even for the I have a div with the class article text. I'm not sure if I have any CSS specifically on that or not, but let's go ahead and put that div around my content that I have here. I mean, I could replace this div, or I could put the div inside of it. It doesn't matter too much, just as long as I have a div with the same class that I use for the same the static HTML. So this, at this point, am I forgetting any other classes? No. At this point, it should look a little bit similar to what I have for the plan here. Let's take a look. Whoops, I did actually update it. Update. Yeah. So I have the photo here, I have the title down here, and the same way it has by the person's name dash the date. I have the same thing down here, and then it has like the actual content down below. Now, as far as this image, let's take a look at this. So right above the header tag, it has a div with the class post thumbnail. Inside of that div, we have an image tag, and that image tag, that image tag has like some classes on it. It has an SRC, which is going to that particular image. It has a width and a height on it. But basically, this one line here where we have CE2224 post thumbnail. By the way, that is my theme name. So whatever you actually called your theme, you're going to see your theme name here. So this line right here that I have highlighted in my single.php is creating this div here. We have post thumbnail. So again, if you like the way that looks, then just forget about it. But if we want to use the image in our own way, like in my static HTML, I'm using it as a background image. I'm a big fan of background images in this particular context because I can crop it however I actually want to. So I actually have a div with the class article image, and I'm using style background image to say that's the image that I actually want. Now, in order to pull the URL of this thumbnail, okay, hang on a second. I'm going to go ahead and copy this from my static HTML and put it above my header. Now, one thing I can't do is I can't just take this PHP code and put it right here in this place. The reason why I can't just take this PHP code and put it right here is because this PHP code, as it is right now, is doing a lot more than just displaying the URL. This PHP code right now is not only displaying the URL, but it's also creating this div, it's creating this image tag, it's creating a whole bunch of nonsense that we don't actually need at this point. So really, and what we need to replace in this spot here is just the URL of the image itself. So the code for that, go ahead here. No. I'm pretty sure we used it in our PHP somewhere. Oh, here it is. The post thumbnail URL. So right now I'm going to replace what I have as far as PHP here, where we have my theme name underscore post thumbnail, and I'm going to replace it with the post thumbnail URL parentheses. So if I just display that as it is, then instead of an actual image, I'm getting the URL. That black box is what I have for article image here so far, but what I have above that is just the URL, and I know that it's going to give me just the URL when I have that PHP code. So now I can use this PHP code where I would normally have the URL for the background image. So I have background image, colon, URL, parentheses, quote, and then I start the PHP code, and then I end the quote for the URL, I end the parentheses for the URL, and I end the quotation for the whole style thing. So, somewhere within my custom CSS, I've defined what article image actually is and how it should crop and all of that other jazz. But in line with the div, I'm setting up the background image in this way. And now if I go ahead and refresh it, oh boy. So it is showing us the actual image here. It's basically, it's not a great image for this particular case because it's very, very large. But it's showing the, it's filling this entire space just like it would with my article. And it's basically just cropping it right in the middle for this particular image.
Would you have to make sure the photo is sized for that?
Well, what I would do is I would give my client some parameters, basically explaining how this works. I'm going to say, hey, it's going to use the full width of this this image, and it's going to crop it in the middle. So try to kind of make sure that your images are the content for the images are going to be in that space, and like these are going to be the dimensions that it kind of crops it to. Now you're going to have some clients that are not going to be too happy with that. And they might say like, I really want to show the entire image no matter what. So I don't want to crop, I don't want you to crop the image. I just want you to show the whole image. And in which case, in the CSS, right now I have background size cover so that it really uses the entire space. If I change that to background size contain, then we're definitely seeing the whole image. And it's just going to fill in the extra space with whatever I set up as a background color. So some clients might like that a little bit better. Some clients might be okay with the cover effect, but they might not like it cropping in on the center. Maybe generally, for whatever reason, they always like their images cropped from the top. Then you could set this so that, like, you could say, instead of background position center, you could say top space center. And what that's going to do is it's going to crop it from the top, but still center it horizontally. So if you do top space center with the background position, it's going to crop it from the top. But generally, at least in my experience, I find that most clients will either be okay with cropping the image in that way, or they'll want to do like more of a contained thing, where you're seeing the whole image and then just fills in the rest of the space with whatever background image you have there. Now, I want to remind you, the way this originally looked before we did any of this customization is it just showed the image by itself. And if you don't want to set up a specific space for your image, like I have here, like you just basically want the image to just be there, and it can be as big as it needs to be or as small as it needs to be, then just use this as it is. Like just use the same exact way that the single.php already set it up. And you can still customize generally how this might position. Maybe you can kind of center it, or maybe you can make it like a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller based off of the classes that it has here. So in my custom CSS, I could create a definition for post underscore thumbnail, or I could create a definition for image that has one of these classes in it. And then I can customize the way this looks if I don't actually want to crop it or specify the size that it's going to be taking up, just like I have in my design here. It kind of, again, all depends on the needs of the client and kind of what design you're actually going for. But yeah. Any questions on that? So I'm just about ready to move on from single.php. Again, a lot of the stuff that I've put in here so far is trying to recreate my particular design. But I want you to focus not on the HTML. I want you to focus just on the small bits of PHP which are in here. Because this bit of PHP is where you're getting the URL. Where you actually put in that URL has to do with your own static HTML, like however you decide to define that. And this little part right here is where you're getting the title of the post. And again, however you decided to actually do your HTML, you want to decide like where that actual title needs to go. Same thing is if you have an author or if you have a date, like where you're actually finding the code for that. Same thing with just simply the content. Like these small bits of PHP code are the main things that you actually need in order to accomplish your static. Now, if you have, I should have specified this a while ago probably. If you have a lot of complicated HTML other than just the post content itself, like if you have like a sidebar or things like that, what I recommend is first just prioritizing just the post itself. So just focus on just getting this up. There are a couple of different ways of getting any other kind of sidebars up, but I would first start off with just getting the information from that one post in there first. Does that make sense? But yeah. Any last questions about this post before I move on to the article or the archive one? Okay. So, like I said, when we're talking about these category pages, if I go into the dashboard, I go under posts, I go under categories, I get a list of all the categories I have, along with a count of how many articles I have inside that category. I can edit any one of these by clicking on edit, but if I want to view a list of just the posts under that category, I would click on view. So this page is giving me a list of those particular articles. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL that I have here, where it says /category events, or /category editorial, or /category featured, or /category latest news. I'm going to go ahead and use these URLs inside. I'm going to open up my header PHP. And this has my main navigation, what I'm actually seeing here at the top. So this has my main navigation broken out into two different parts, one for the desktop, one for the mobile, but it still should be going to the same place. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and post those URLs so it goes to category /latest news or category /featured, so that my navigation will actually work as a way to go to a page which has these the list of these posts. Okay, so now latest goes to the category for latest news, featured, editorial, and events. Cool. Okay. So, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and open up article.php. I'm sorry, archive.php. I'm going to go ahead and open that up in brackets. Now, I didn't actually make a static HTML template for what this page should look like, but we can still kind of design on the fly a little bit as far as what we want this to look like. Now, just like with my page.php, just like with my single .php, you're going to see that we are starting off with get header, and we're ending off with get footer and get sidebar. Let's get that get sidebar in there, because we don't actually put that here. So we have the get header, we have the get footer, which is just kind of, again, the bread of our sandwich. We even with this article.php, we even still have our old friends, the div with the ID primary and the main with the ID main, as a way of kind of sandwiching all of this content in here. So inside of this div with the ID main, this main with the ID main, we have a block of PHP code. So just like before, let's see how much we can simplify what we have here so that we know exactly what it is that we're working with. So the first thing is we have an if statement. This if statement, again, is a way of creating a fork in the road. We have an if, we have an else, and we have an end of the if-else statement. What this if is trying to do is it's trying to check to make sure we actually have posts. So if we have posts for this particular category, then it's going to do all of this code here. If we don't have any posts, then it's going to do what's inside the else. In other words, if we're going to category/events, then yes, it's going to display a list of posts that are under that category. If we go to category/gobbledygook, then it's going to say, oops, that page just can't be found. Or if we just simply neglected to tag any of our posts for that specific category. Like maybe events actually does exist, but we actually didn't tag any of our posts with that category. So once again, when we go to actually edit any one of the posts, we can tag the posts with the right sidebar here, what a category could actually be under. By the way, there are checkboxes, so things could be under multiple categories if you really wanted them to. But yeah, so this else is basically saying what's going on if we can't find any posts under that category. Now, right now, it's pulling it's using the get template part, which, if you remember from the single.php, what that get template part is doing is it's pulling in from that folder where we say template parts /content. It's finding that folder template parts, and it's finding one of these files. In this particular case, it's going with this one that's called none. So see where it says like template parts /content, comma none. That's letting you know basically that's pulling this particular template, where it's kind of saying nothing found, and you can kind of read some of this text where it says sorry, but nothing was matched to your search terms, or it seems like you can't find what you're looking for. It's kind of the same things that you're seeing here, basically. But anyway, that's all to say that for the most part, we can ignore what's going on in this else. What we really care about is what happens when we actually do have some posts they can find. If you would like, you can go ahead and just get rid of this and write your own text saying like, sorry, can't find it. Or you can kind of customize this as far as this content none. We're not really going to worry about that today. We're mostly just simply going to deal with what happens when we actually do have a list of posts under this category. So, we're just dealing with what's inside this if statement. And the very first thing we see in here is we see a header. We see a header with the class page header. And inside that we have some PHP code here. Let's take a look at the inspect element. Inside of div with the ID primary, inside of the main with the ID main, we have a header. Again, this is header with the class page header, just like it has here. Inside of the header with the class page header, we have an H1 tag that has the page title category events. So this PHP code is basically just pulling in that category title. It's putting it inside of an H1 tag. If we wanted to, we could simplify this. It's also even pulling in a description. So if these categories had a description, this is the description for the events category. We would see that right underneath the title here. So it's pulling in both the title as well as the description. So if we wanted to customize that, we could customize that here. I mean, really, I'm actually kind of fine with the way that it's turned out right here. But if you wanted to customize it, right here is where it's giving the beginning and end of that article title, and here is where it has the beginning and end of the HTML code for that article archive description. So you could customize, like, you know, what classes you have here or what HTML you have to wrap the title and to wrap the description for this. What I'm more concerned with is what's going on down here. Because the way that's laying this out here is I'm not a huge fan of. So after the header, if we take a look at this, the inspect element. After the header, we have a series of articles. So we have, and by articles, I'm actually talking about the literal article tag. So we have article, and we have article, and we have article, and we have article. So inside of main, we have header, and we have a bunch of different articles here. If we take a look at the archive.php, inside the main, we have the header, and we have a while loop. This while loop is what is creating all those different articles. And if you take a look inside this while loop, in addition to a whole bunch of comments here, we have our old friend get template part, and it's referencing template parts / content. And I'm just going to tell you that what it's actually pulling is this content PHP file here. So it's taking what's inside this content PHP file here, inside of the template parts folder. It's taking all the code from this file and putting it right in here with this while loop. How do we know that? Well, we just opened this up just a minute ago. But the very first thing we see inside this content PHP is an article tag. And the very last thing we see in this is the ending article tag. So inside this archive.php, where we have this line right here, it's taking all the code from this content.php and putting it right in this place. Now, if back when we were deciding to do the single.php, Did I close that? So at some point when we were deciding to, when we were editing this single.php, we copied the code from content into single.php. If we decided not to do that, we only edited the content here, then all those changes would exist for this one as well, because it's pulling in the exact same template, content.php. So, for example, for single.php, if I made all those same changes to this article tag, if I made all those same changes inside of content.php, then what I would see here is the same format that I would get if I were on any one of these individual pages. So, oh, I don't even have a link here. That's a problem. Which one is this? Oh, this is events. Let's go to editorial. Okay. So this is editorial for title page. This is if I'm only on the editorial for page. And this is pulling from single.php. This is the category of editorial where it's just pulling all of the posts under that data category. And you're going to see that it looks exactly the same. Because if I edit the content PHP, and then it's going to use the exact same format from single.php as it does for the archive. However, chances are that's probably not what you want. I mean, maybe it is, in which case you can do that. But chances are it's probably not what you want. Chances are you probably want a slightly different format to this list than you would if you were on that page by itself. For one thing, I mean, this is going to be a really long page, depending on how much content you have here, how many articles you have here. So chances are you don't want it to be exactly the same. That's why, again, I'm not a huge fan of editing the content PHP. I like to copy the code, put it where I want it, and then edit it from there. That way I can have something very different for single PHP when you're actually on that post page than I would for the archive PHP when I'm seeing a list of those posts. Does that kind of make sense? Okay.
It's
Like I
still
said,
sinking in.
Seems like
It's-
Yeah.
content.php is sort of worthless.
So the thing is, it helps to have the, we're not using it, but it helps to kind of have the, it's the template of templates. It's basically giving us a reference point to copy from. So if I want to say, like, this content PHP like has a lot of information in it, and I can basically just pull like individual things that I want. Even though with the single, I definitely simplified a lot of this. But the content PHP, it kind of has, you know, again, like a lot of stuff out of the box, so it's like already there. So
So the thing that you're deleting and replacing with content PHP is the one that says get template part and put get post type, right? That
inside the article PHP, yes.
Okay.
So from this point, I could do one of two things. Either I could treat this just like I did with single PHP, copy all this from content PHP into this place, and then just simplify from there. Or, since I kind of know what I'm doing already, I'm kind of a little big for my britches at this point. If I kind of know what I'm doing already, like from what I did with the single PHP, let's start working from here. And let's start like kind of thinking about like the individual things that I want, rather than trying to simplify this from a more complicated template. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by copying what I did with the article tag inside of single.php. I'm going to copy all of this, and inside of archive.php, I'm going to replace this guy here. In fact, I'm going to replace this guy along with these quotes, these comments. But just like with single.php, I want to be very careful, because what I'm starting with here is HTML. What I'm ending with here is HTML. And inside of our archive.php, I'm already inside of a PHP block. So I can't just simply replace this. I need to make sure that I end the PHP for the while. And I'm going to make sure I start PHP before the end while. So now this PHP block ends here, and this PHP block starts here. And what I have in between here would be normal HTML. So now this gives me the right landing pad for this HTML code that I'm actually copying. So I'm going to copy this HTML code that I did in single PHP, and I'm going to replace it right here. And the reason why I'm copying it from single PHP instead of the content.php is because in single PHP, it's already a little bit simpler. Okay. So once again, inside, so now I'm looking at archive.php, and what it's repeating over and over again is this article tag. Inside the article tag, I have a div that's pulling out the thumbnail. I have a header which has the title, and it has the author and time or date that was posted, and then I have the content itself here. So, like I said, I didn't actually make a design or a static HTML page for this, so we're kind of doing this off the fly. But if I take a look at this, once again, what I'm looking at is very similar to if I were to actually look at this individual page. I have the photo, I have the title information, I have all the content here. Same thing if I'm looking at the list. I have the photo, header information, content. Photo, header information, content, so on and so forth. Again, which would create a very long page. Let's simplify this a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the photo on the left, and I'm going to start off with putting all the rest of the stuff on the right. So we have a list like where we have the photo and the content right next to it, as we have the list all the way down. So we already have this the photo appearing here inside of article image. Let's go and create another div. Let's call this let's call it archive content right. So inside of archive content right, I'm going to have the header as well as the entry content, all the stuff which would appear on the right. And for the article image, let's go ahead and replace that with archive content left. Okay. And then I'm going to do a little bit of CSS code right inside this file, just so I'm only editing one file. Ideally, I would put this inside of my custom CSS, but I just want to do this a little bit quicker. So I'm going to create a definition for archive content left and archive content right. That's using these two classes, one that contains the image and one that contains the right content. For archive content left, well, I want to make sure I'm doing the same kind of things with the background image. So we're going to do background dash position center, background dash color, black, background dash size. Let's do cover again. And background dash repeat, no repeat. Let's also set a specific width to this. And a specific height to it. Let's make this with a little bit smaller. Okay. And lastly, let's go ahead and make sure that it's going to float to the left. For the article on the right, let's go ahead and set a specific width to it as well. We're not going to set a height to it, but let's go ahead and do a float. I'm going to do a float left and do the margin left to specify a certain amount of pixels from the left. Yeah, let's take a look at that. Let's go ahead and set up this article. Okay, I think we're just a little too wide on these. Okay. So we have photo here on the left, the content for it here on the right. Now, these aren't lining up quite that well, because this H1 it has a lot of margin, a lot of padding on it. Same thing as this header. Okay, that's a little better. So they now line up a little bit. I would probably want to space out the articles so they have just a little bit of margins on them. Oh, actually, why don't we do it this way? Let's put in a border. So I'll do border bottom, 1 pixel solid, and some sort of gray. And we'll put in a padding bottom of 60 pixels, and we'll do a margin bottom of 60 pixels. Yeah, that's pretty close. Anyway, so that gives us a little bit of a better list here. So we have like a photo here on the left-hand side. We have like the article information here on the right. Now, this is still kind of a long page because it's pulling all of the content from this page into this list here. Now, maybe that's what I want. Maybe that's not what I want. But there is a way to kind of pull a smaller bit of the content here. And what we can do is in the archive.php, where we would normally have the content. And this is fine for the single.php because we want all the content. But in the archive, when we're pulling up a list, instead of the content, we're going to pull up the excerpt. So this right now is what's going inside of the entry content. I also have this div with the article text, but that's just from my static HTML. What's more important, this is going inside the entry content for the archive.php. Instead of the content, I'm replacing it with the excerpt. Now when we take a look at it, we get a much shorter bit of information here. Where is that information coming from? Well, it's coming from one of two places. If I go to edit the post here, you'll see that where it says editorial for content, and it's got a whole bunch of Latin here. It's pulling in, without any sort of line breaks or anything like that, it's pulling in a certain number of characters or a certain number of words from that content. So by default, it's going to pull in like about the first paragraph of whatever you have. However, there's also a way to specify something a little bit different for this excerpt so that it's not just pulling it from the full content. We're able to pull in something very specific. Now, here when I go to edit the post, right now I see a box that says excerpt here. If you do not see that, then that's one of the things that is hidden behind the screen options here. So once again, in the top right, when you go to edit one of the posts, there's a checkbox for excerpt. And as long as that is checked, then you should see it down below. And here, if I type in something, anything, as soon as there's any content inside that box, then it's going to replace the excerpt with that content. If it does not find any content inside that box, like we didn't set up for editorial 3 or 1, then it's going to pull the excerpt from the content itself. So I'm a big fan of the excerpt because, again, it gives you full control over what content is going to appear here. Again, it also takes out like line breaks and things like that, just to try to simplify it as much as possible. So a lot of times you don't end up with what you actually want. So the excerpt will give you the ability to show just like the teaser for what it is that you want before you actually get into the article itself. Yeah, if we don't have any text in here whatsoever, it's going to pull it.
Whatever the paragraph is.
Yeah, it's going to pull it from this beginning content. I can't remember exactly how much it's pulling, but it's a certain number of words, basically, from the content.
Other articles has some HTML at the beginning of the text, and it's actually pulling in HTML.
The HTML text?
Yeah, instead of like, I don't know if it's.
You might want to just double check to make sure that things are things are ended off correctly, especially the PHP code is ended off correctly or started correctly. But I could take a look at that.
Well, I mean the headlines also aren't linked to the article.
Yes, thank you very much. So that was the last thing that I wanted to get to for this archive, is that yes, as you might notice if you've been following along, these aren't actually linked so far. Where we had, before we started messing with this, before we started messing this up, when it provided a list of all these different pages, the titles themselves would actually link to that specific article. But But with all of our customization, like, yeah, we're pulling in a little bit of PHP to bring in the thumbnail. We're pulling in a little bit of PHP to bring in the title. We're pulling in a little bit of PHP to bring in the author. But we don't have anything in here which is actually linking to that particular page or post. Now, if you remember from page.php, we actually did in these lists of these different posts, we did have a link to that specific post. So, like for features here, for example, we have a while loop that's going through all the different posts under features. In addition to bringing up the image, in addition to bringing up the title, we also have a link itself. The link is the permalink. Now, the permalink is going to bring in the literal exact URL to that specific page. So you can see, just like we have in page.php, we have href and it's surrounding this bit of PHP code because it's bringing in the exact code for that. What that means is we could use this exact PHP code here, the permalink, and we can set this up in one of two ways. One, maybe we can set up the title. We could create an anchor tag with href equals quote, and href equals quote, and then inside those quotations we have the PHP for the permalink. After the title, we end off that anchor tag. If it makes it a little bit easier to read, let's put this on a couple of different lines. We have the H1, we have the anchor tag, which has inside the href the permalink, and inside the anchor tag itself, we have the title. So that's one way of including that in. Another way to include this in is maybe right after the excerpt, we say the same thing. We have a href, and that's going to go to the permalink. And inside the A for that, we have view full article. It doesn't matter. So this is right after the excerpt. We have an anchor tag, which the href for is going to the permalink, and we just put in our own text, view full article. So, again, we've set it up so that the titles themselves will link to the article, but we've also put in our own link where it says view full article, and that will also link to that particular article. Now, at this point, I mean, this isn't exactly how I want it to look. There's a lot of space here, there's weird things here, but all of this could definitely be done either inside the style that I have inside the same page, or better yet, actually done inside the custom CSS here. But you have the framework that you need as far as like what to actually include in here regarding like titles, authors, dates, things like that. I'm not saying your category page should look exactly like this. You can kind of set it up however you want. But I've shown you pretty much the various different things you would want to pull in for this category list, particularly like regarding like the excerpt, regarding like the links, regarding like, you know, how to do like again from like the single.php where we're doing like the titles, the thumbnail URL. It's pulling in all of that information. But yeah. Any questions about the archive?
Do you want us to have a fully built out archive page in addition to the article and
Definitely focus on the home page and the focus on the home page and the single pages first. If you have time to kind of customize the archive, I mean, the links that you have in your menu, first of all, the links that you have in your menu should go to those category pages. So again, that's just a matter of in the header.php, setting up the hrefs for all those menu items. Just simply go to category / whatever that slug is for the category. And again, I mean, archive does have something functional already in it. It's just not pretty. So the thing is, I want you to definitely make the home page and the individual post pages as functional as pretty as possible. The archive page could kind of be a secondary thing as you have time to kind of just treat up a little bit. And again, maybe the only thing you want to do to, maybe you don't actually want to edit the HTML. Maybe you just simply want to edit the CSS with that. That's fine. What we're doing with the HTML is kind of gives us as much control as possible. We can put in our own HTML. We can separate like the thumbnail as well as the content in this way, where we have them floated next to each other. We can put in our own classes and IDs. What I showed you today is if you want to edit the HTML for this archive page. You don't have to edit the HTML. You could just edit the CSS with it. It's just sometimes a little bit more challenging if you have a specific idea in mind. But if you just need to kind of make minor improvements here and there, then you could probably do that with just the CSS. You can even make things go away in the CSS. Like, so for example, if there is a particular class or ID around the author name, and you're saying to yourself, I don't want the author name in there, then basically with your CSS, you can make that go away by just specifying that class or ID and just saying display none on that. So it's easy to make things go away. It's easy to kind of just slightly tweak positions or styles. It's more when it comes to adding information in this archive that makes it a bit more challenging. So that's where you actually have to edit the HTML yourself. Any other questions? Okay. So let's